And so you have to start with stuff that a lot of people don't like to build. My dad once said, if you want to be really rich, be a garbage man, because no one wants to take out the garbage, right? So do the stuff that all these other entrepreneurs and founders don't want to do. And that was-
Hello, and welcome to Afternoon Tea. I am super excited because I have Mike Potter, the CEO of Rewind, joining me today. But Mike, before we start, let me set this up. Mike Potter is the co-founder and CEO of Rewind, a leading cloud data backup provider trusted by over 30,000 businesses to protect their data on platforms such as BigCommerce, Shopify, and QuickBooks. A veteran entrepreneur, Mike has over 25 years of experience building solutions for the software, cloud, and data analytics space, including 10 years at Adobe and Mozilla. He earned his MBA from the University of Ottawa and his Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering from McMaster University. And Mike currently resides in Ottawa, Canada. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Chris, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So Rewind, I mean, reading about it, out in Ottawa, we're in Vancouver. So I love discovering more and more great companies across our great nation. But can you just tell me, why don't you start from the beginning? Can you tell me the creation story of Rewind, please?
Yeah, I mean, we live in Ottawa, and I'm a big backups fan, and that's really sort of the genesis of the idea. I've subscribed to a backup service for a long time. I've lost data before. During my time at Adobe, I was a technical evangelist, and I remember doing a talk in front of a few hundred people one day, went to advance my slides and the computer froze. It's like, that's kind of weird. And so I rebooted my computer. And so the screen behind me went black. Nobody could see anything. And my computer reboots, and it's got a picture of a hard drive with a big question mark over it.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, okay, I guess that's the end of that talk. We won't be doing the rest of it. And so I think once you've lost data, you really make sure that doesn't happen again, right? Mm-hmm. So I am that backup freak. I back up my computers to 2 hard drives that are here on the ground in my office. I've got a whole separate system that backs up into the cloud using a service called Backblaze. Like I know I don't want to lose that data again. And I thought it would be a really great business to start. So in 2015, I approached my friend James Chichelski, who I'd worked with in the past at another startup in Ottawa. And I said, let's do something on the side. We started a first project that didn't really go anywhere. And so a few months in, I said, let's do this. I think backups is going to be a good business. So he said, what do you want to back up? And I said, well, let's start backing up Shopify. We're in Ottawa, they're in Ottawa. It's 2015. They're growing like crazy, and they're still growing like crazy. But you could tell that they had, hundreds of thousands of merchants. And that was sort of how we started. We launched the app for free in June of 2015, just to see if people had the problem. And sure enough, at Christmas time, one of our customers lost all of their data in their store, called us up, and they're like, hey, you can help us, right? Because we just installed you. And we really had no idea whether the product could do what it said it could do. It was free at that time. We weren't charging anything. But it did. It worked exactly as it was intended. We had all of their data backed up. I remember calling him up and saying, okay, reload your page. You should see your store exactly the way it was. He reloaded it. It was exactly the way it was before he lost all of his products. And he was over the moon. And that was, we thought at that point we had a pretty good business. So in 2016, we started charging for it, and we've grown it from then to a company now, about 115 people.
Fantastic. Well, that is really exciting. So do you have your own data center then for the backups, or do you use another cloud services data center and just, put it to there, or what's the magic sauce with that?
Yes, we leverage Amazon and a lot of the functionality that they've got. The ability to scale that they've got has really, really helped us. We handle, like you said, backups for about 30,000 customers, hundreds of millions of updates on a monthly basis, billions of items. Without that infrastructure and without their expertise in scaling that infrastructure, I'm not sure that you could really build this business without an enormous amount of capital and really great people who knew how to run data centers. So we leverage Amazon. We store data in Canada, in the US, in Europe, because some privacy regulations and legal regulations have stipulations on where data is stored and processed. So we make sure that we abide by laws like the CCPA or the GDPR or the Canadian Privacy Act. So using Amazon, leveraging Amazon, storing all of our data in various data centers in Amazon in a bunch of different continents.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, in my notes, I made a slight mistake, and I said that you raised $15 million, and you very humbly suggested it was a little bit more. And you said, actually, since we've done 80 million, which made me go, wow, okay, that's incredibly impressive, and congratulations for building, not only a product but a trust that people want to be part of and all that. But can you tell me about what's it like to raise that much investment?
Yeah, I think we went through the first 4 years or so of the company raising very little. We kind of had this reputation, at least in Ottawa, being mainly bootstrapped, which was not exactly true. We had raised, I think, every kind of round you can possibly raise, but every time we raised money, we really tried to raise as little as possible. So we raised a friends and family round in 2017. We raised a seed round. We raised a pre-seed round. We raised a seed round. We raised a seed B round. And then we raised our Series A last November, actually about a year ago now, of 15 million, like you mentioned. And the business, it was just kind of an evolution of how we had run the business, and we had really great business fundamentals like underlying the company, and that allowed us to raise that 15 million a year ago. And as we invested that 15 million, we ended up buying a company in Germany that does backups for GitHub. So we added support for GitHub backups to our product, and we've grown that business nicely. We've grown our own revenue nicely. And so earlier this year, just a few months ago, we raised an additional $65 million to continue to grow the business. And I think, it's a considerable amount of money, but it kind of follows just a natural evolution of where the company was going, to be honest with you. Like, as you grow, and your revenue is growing and your business fundamentals are showing that they're sound, it's just natural to want to put more capital into the business and try and expand it quickly and cover off more platforms and grow to be a really, massive Canadian success story. And so that was really the reason that we went and raised that 65 million. Was the business was doing great, the fundamentals are really strong, and we think we can build just a massive business that's doing backups for every cloud service that's out there.
That's fantastic. So when you like discuss the raise, because I'm always intrigued by the raise sides of businesses, do you say, well, this is our ask, or this is our want, and this is what we can do, or is it more, like, did you have a number in mind, or do the actual investors come in with a number that they think? Like, how do you meet that happy medium?
We had a number that we were looking to raise. Like, we have a plan and a budget that we're working towards, and we have a sense of how much money we want to be spending in a month, in a year, and how much we're burning on a yearly basis, how much revenue we're going to bring in. And so we've got sort of this sort of financial model that we've got that goes out a couple of years. So we had a good sense of what we were looking to bring in. And then as you talk to investors, there's certain investors that you really like, that you think can add a lot of value, that you really want to make sure you get onto your cap table so that they're on your board, so that you can talk to them, so you can access the people that they're connected to and the help that they're providing to you. And, in our case, it just so happened that the amount that the investors wanted to put in was substantially more than what the company could realistically absorb. And so we did a secondary offering as part of that Series B round, just to make sure that we could get those investors on board, because we really liked the people that we were talking to. We thought they'd add a lot of value, and we had to figure out a way of getting them on board without putting too much capital into the business, because we really didn't have an efficient way of spending it in terms of the growth that we think we can achieve.
Yeah, and that's important. I mean, you have to think on both sides of that equation, right? Like, if you take too much money, well, then how do you do the next raise that looks attractive to other investors and all that? So you do. I mean, a lot of people, unsophisticated, entrepreneurs, will be like, well, just give me everything. Like, I want $200 million, but they don't realize that now you have to make, you have to raise at 10 times that, or at 8 times. Like, it's very difficult to do, and anything looks negative. So I think that the controlled raise, but like a very huge number in terms of controlled raise is fantastic. So congratulations on that. Are most of your investors, are they in the States? Are they in Canada? Are they in a combination?
A combination. So Innovia has invested in Rewind as part of their sort of standard fund and their growth fund. So we've got both funds that are in Rewind. And then we took money as well from Insight Venture Partners in our Series B round. Ridge Investors is a group out of San Francisco that's invested, in Bessemer Venture Partners out of Boston and New York has also invested. So we've got, a few American investors, and then Innovia and another one called Scale Up that led our seed round are the investors mainly from Canada.
Fantastic. Well, let's get back to the business side then. So again, you're in Ottawa, and Shopify, obviously, I mean, as he said, it made natural sense. Do you have people because Shopify technically isn't the client, it's the clients of Shopify is the client, but you need to have that relationship with Shopify to make it work, or to at least massage what needs what needs to be in there. How much time, or do you have people that are dedicated just to that relationship, or how do you develop that relationship with Shopify?
Yeah, I think there's a number of us that have really good relationships with Shopify. I mean, obviously, being in the same city with them certainly helps. We can get together in person. We see them at events that we go to. We've spoken at their company, both internal events and external events that are hosted at their office. So we have a great relationship with a lot of people that work there. I think we are one of the top apps that they have, and so they're obviously great partners of ours, and have connected with us to help sort of tell the story of a successful Shopify app. And there's just a number of people on the Rewind side, like on all levels, that have really good relationships with them, whether that be on the product side, whether it be on the marketing side. We've just recently hired a head of partnerships who's working with them as well. I've got relationships with them stemming back from the time when we first started. So it's, I'd say it's not necessarily, there's not necessarily one person at Rewind that is focused on the relationship with Shopify as much as there are a number of people that are focused on the business, and in turn have really good relationships with that team, because they're a great partner, like all of the platforms that we support, actually.
For sure. And I guess, you have to be on the technical side, because you have to know who, of what's the rollout or the roadmap, so that, it doesn't break anything on your product. So I guess it's a full-fledged relationship. And then, so you'd have, like, say with WebCommerce, or with, was it WebCommerce or
BigCommerce?
BigCommerce. Thank you. BigCommerce. It would be a very similar thing where you'd have people on the ground making relationships with these large organizations in a very similar way.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you've got people from a product side that are connecting with their product managers, like you said, to understand their roadmap, make sure that there's nothing that they're launching that's going to be breaking the product, that if they do make some changes, that we know that we can restore the data properly. That's a big concern of us always, to make sure that although you can, backing up is relatively easy, restoring the data is actually extremely difficult. The smallest change that they make could break the restore functionality. So we have to make sure that that's constantly working. So same with BigCommerce, same with QuickBooks, same with GitHub. There are relationships up and down the organization with all of the platforms that we support, from a product side, from a marketing side, from a partnership side, from a support side as well. So yeah, it really goes throughout the organization. Really, it's one of the, I guess, consequences of building a business that is dependent on these platforms, right? Like our business only works because we're backing up all of these partners' applications, and so we have to have really good relationships with all of them.
For sure. Well, I'm intrigued, because you founded the company in 2015, as you said, but you worked as a senior project manager until 2017. So it was we'll call it a side hustle, whatever you want to call it. What was that aha moment when you said, "No, I'm jumping in. Like, this is where I want to go"? Was there that aha moment?
Well, so this is my second startup. The previous one was called Add In Social. And with Add In Social, I think the mistake I made was quitting my job too early and diving into it without having customers, without having revenue, and then adding the pressure of having, kids at home, a wife, a mortgage, wanting to put food on the table. So when James and I did this one, I was really adamant that I didn't want to be leaving my job too early. I actually really liked my job at Sig. It was a fantastic company. I liked what I was doing, but it did get to the point where you could see that this was growing very quickly. Our first 3 years of revenue, I think we made $30,000 our first year, $300,000 our second year, and $1.2 million our third year. So in that second year, when you're growing 10x,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty obvious that this thing is growing quickly, and this is not like a normal thing. I just made sure to give my boss as much notice as possible before leaving. So I told him months in advance. I said, hey, I was very open about it. I was working on this project on the side, nights and weekends, might work out, might not. And then as it started growing and you could see it being successful, I gave him a heads up. I'm like, this is turning out really good. I'm likely going to be leaving. And then when I decided to leave, I gave him as much notice as I possibly could. I think it was like 3 or 4 months notice to say, listen, like I am leaving, like just as a heads up here, this is working out. And you just knew, at the time it was great because there was actually 4 of us at that point who were working on Rewind, all of us part-time, nights and weekends. And, the conversation with my wife was a really easy conversation because we were essentially at that point, all 4 of us working 2 jobs. You'd go work 9 to 5 in your day job, and then you'd come home nights and weekends and do the side hustle. And, the company at that point was making tens of thousands of dollars a month. And so we could say, listen, we're going to quit our day jobs and work on this other thing without any change in pay, without any change in salary, without any change in compensation, because the company could sustain itself at that point. And that's a really easy conversation to have with, your significant other, because it's like, listen, I'm doing 2 jobs. Now I'll just be doing 1 job and I won't have to work nights and weekends. I'd like to work on this. And so that's sort of how it went. But it was pretty amazing, I think, as we look back, to see that we had 4 people that worked essentially 16 months to 18 months of nights and weekends to get this working. I mean, that was a long time. I remember Friday nights upgrading databases, and I'm sure all of us wanted to do something other than work on a database upgrade on a Friday night. As exciting as that is to do, we did what it took to make sure that the company was successful.
Yeah, I don't know why you're saying that, but I had this fear of typing the command RM minus RF star. I've done that before. if you want to really,
we're a backup company. We're a backup company, so we were good. We knew we were pretty good on the disaster recovery front.
I would imagine I could have used your backups for 1 or 2 times where I thought I was getting a little too creative with my scripting there. Well, you talked a little bit about ad in social, and I think that's really interesting. You already had some lessons learned in terms of not jumping as quickly, which I think is mature and really interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more about ad in social, like the idea behind it and what you did with it?
Yeah, I mean, the idea came when I was at Adobe and I was watching us launch these products and really trying to coordinate all of these social media campaigns. So posting to the blog, posting to YouTube, to Facebook, to Twitter, and you could see all of these social networks starting to pop up and take off. LinkedIn comes in around that time as well. And I found that the management and coordination of those campaigns was really difficult. So what we did with Ad in Social was we built this product that allowed us to coordinate a social media campaign. So you could schedule a video to go live on YouTube at a certain date and time. It would then be embedded into a blog post. That blog post could go live. It would take the URL of that blog post that to Facebook, post that to Twitter, post that to LinkedIn, aggregate all the stats and metrics and all of the comments around all of the posts, and give you sort of this holistic view of your launch campaign. And that product I thought was a good idea, but it was maybe a little bit ahead of its time. The execution wasn't super good, I'd say, on it. And the other thing we realized was that as we tried to sell that to agencies, that was work that agencies were actually doing with interns. And those interns were, being paid $15 an hour and being billed out at more than $15 an hour.
Much more, I bet.
And so, yeah. And so we successfully built a product that reduced, revenue for these companies, which isn't a good thing to be selling to people. And so we ended up pivoting and saying, okay, what do we have? Like, what's the technology that we have? And we had all of these connections to social media. So we pivoted slightly into adding support for all of those social networks to email marketing providers. There's a lot of them out there, like MailChimp and Constant Contact are kind of the leaders out there, but there are hundreds of smaller providers throughout the States and Canada that really didn't have the people to add social capabilities and publishing into their email apps, but their customers were asking for it. So that's the sort of the name came in, where it was like they could add in social capabilities into their email clients. And we ended up selling it to a company called My Emma. That's an email marketing company out of Nashville.
Well, and what year was it that you started that one? You founded that one?
I think I started that around 2012 or so.
Okay. So
2012 or 2013.
Very good. And then when did you sell? How long was the journey of that of Ad and Social?
I think we worked on it for about a year. It wasn't very long at all. It wasn't, it wasn't multiple years or anything like that. It was a pretty quick sort of start and exit. Because like I said, there really wasn't a whole lot of demand for the product. And although we did end up selling it, it wasn't for any substantial exit.
Okay, well, fair enough. But and any exit's a good exit. If you can get your hands clean and you're ready for that next journey and the next mission. And it sounds like you learned a lot through that journey, which I think is great too. Well, I mean, I love talking. You're probably my age during the .com years, the fun .com years, let's just say. And that was definitely a journey for good or bad that I was part of. But you're the founder of a group or a company called In the Hack. Can you tell me anything about that experience?
Yes, that was a curling website that I started in the late 1990s. So I was a big curler growing up. My mom and dad were both curlers. And in 1997 or so, I went to the Canadian Curling Association and I said, you guys should really get on the internet. You should post the scores and stuff like that. And they really had no web presence at all. And in 1998, curling was going to be an Olympic sport for the first time in Nagano, Japan. So in 1997, just a few months before that, they had what was called the Olympic Curling Trials. And that was the first event where the Canadian Curling Association actually put their scores on the internet, because I sort of volunteered myself. I said, let me do that. My dad was going to be the head official at the event. So I could tag along with him, stay in his hotel room, and we'd post the scores on the internet. And so Saturday and Sunday of that event, everything was fine. My little program that I had written worked really, really well. Everyone was watching the games on TSN. And then Monday, when everyone went to work and started loading up their website, my whole program completely crashed. Like it was overloaded. The amount of traffic was just off the charts. The CCA was blown away by the number of people that were checking out the scores online. And so In the Hack was sort of, it was two parts. It was this website that I ran, and then it was this consulting contract that I got with the Canadian Curling Association to get them online and to start doing online scores for that. And then they took me to the Brier and the Scott Termina Hearts and the juniors. And so I did that for, about years or so in that late 1990s, early 2000s to try and kickstart them onto the internet. But those first few years were like, really literally me typing away and like trying to give a one-line summary of what happened in the end, right? Like Sandra Schmerler makes a draw for one and then 1-0 sort of thing, and then updated the scores manually and pushed that up to the internet. Now everyone can watch all of it on the video and they can just see what's going on. But back then it was literally a human being typing down what the updates were.
Well, I had Kirk a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, and he was telling me how he makes his own maple syrup. Okay, so I'm like, okay, that's very Canadian. But you did the scores of curling. I think you just out Canadian even Kirk. So this is really impressive. I got to say, this is great. Well, let's keep that theme of good Canadian sports up, because one thing that you and I both have in common is we have kids who play hockey. And the one difference is I can't skate, and it sounds like you coach. So tell me, what's easier to organize? A bunch of I want to call it atoms, but under 11 kids, or your first 10 employees?
What's harder, the kids. I find the kids are probably more difficult. Hockey it's just a fun thing, right? Like I love coaching hockey. I think it's a fantastic way to volunteer and to give back to your community. These kids, I've been coaching them, some of them for now 6-7 years. I've got pictures of when they were like little kids in IP. And I was actually at the practice the other day. My son was doing goalie clinic, and you just kind of marvel at the progress that they make, right? From when they first start. And it wasn't that long ago when they could hardly skate. And then, like 6 years later, 7 years later, here they are, my son's a goalie, and so he was at goalie clinic the other day, just learning like the intricate details of like when you make a save, just trying to absorb the puck a bit, and it's just like the slightest body motion that he's spending an hour working on. And I remember back in the day when he could hardly stand, when he'd just put his stick out to make a save, and sometimes it would go through his legs. It's just fun to see how the level of effort that they put in has resulted in them being really good athletes and having a lot of fun playing a sport that I think a lot of us really, really like. So I get a lot out of coaching. It's one of my favorite things to do.
I love that. I love that because my kids are both, my son and daughter both play, and so they're rink brats, and just to see the formation of community around that, I think is super important, as well as I think it's really important for when they start going to different schools. Now they actually know some of the people when they start high school and all this. But here's another very important Canadian question: did you choose for him to be a goalie, or did he ask? Because I know the curse is you never want your kid to be the goalie because it means all the equipment you got to carry.
I was happy just to have them play. That was my philosophy the whole way through, was I don't care what you play, what position you play. I only care that you play. I don't care what sport. I don't care what position. I just want you to play. Because I think, like you said, you learn a lot being part of a team. You get friends for life. It's a great way I think it's a great way for kids to spend their time. And so I have this theory, I don't know if this is true and whether you'd agree with this, but I think people are born wanting to either score goals or save goals. And he never had an interest in scoring many goals. He was always, if he was out on the ice in IEP, he would have been the defense and trying to stop them and block them, as opposed to being the forward trying to score them. His brother's almost the complete opposite. But he wanted to be a goalie in IP. Whenever there was a volunteer to be a goalie, he was like, I want to be that. So he played a lot in IP, and he just continued it through novice. And like I said, to me, it's, we do hear that a lot, that, you don't want your kid to be a goalie. And I just never cared. I was very happy to have him playing and having him enjoy it. And like I said, it's fun to have seen the progress that he's made, because he's a pretty goalie. Awesome. And just fun to watch him and see how much better he is now than 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago. It's it's not a long time, so it's not kind of neat.
And you know what? Your coaching is part of that, part of that effort to make them better humans too, which I think is cool. Well, I mean, speaking of better humans, I think I'm actually kind of a bad human to admit this, but my son was excited when he was in, Pee-wee 2 or level 2 or whatever it was, and he got to be the goalie, and I was doing my secret page, like, just get him snowballed with 15 goals. And he got like 10 against him. And he's like, I never want to do this again. I'm like, that's too bad, son. It was like, thank you. Like, thank you. Back to defense. You know what? You can stop the kids in other ways, man. The other thing about goalies is you can't miss a game. Because people don't want to just become a goalie all of a sudden. But anyhow, let's go back, because one thing that really intrigues me as well is that you were the senior product marketing manager at Adobe around the Flash platform. So were you there at the time when Apple kind of did their song and dance to not allow it? What did that feel like? What was the experience inside Adobe when Apple, said, hey, we're not going to support Flash, which was the big thing driving the experiences on the net at the time?
Yeah, I think a lot of people at Adobe, a lot of people in general, recognize that the decision to do that was mainly driven around the desire to monetize games in other ways through their app store platform, right? It wasn't based on any sort of real technological reason or anything like that. I know they said that it was slow, but obviously a lot of that stuff could have been overcome with hard work. It was really around monetization. I think Apple did a great job of framing the issue and defining how it was discussed in the media. Flash, I think at that time was also under considerable competition from HTML5 and some of the work that Ajax was doing. I know that was something that as we were looking at how we could compete from a developer point of view, that the speed of development of Ajax and some of those frameworks was really quite astonishing. I remember telling my bosses that in the time it takes for people to download our IDE, they had already downloaded, installed, and got their first Ajax app up and running before they even downloaded our software, right? Like it was that it was sort of that much of a difference. And so it was a really difficult time, I think, from a competition perspective. Certainly Flash, I think, could have gotten, personally, my opinion is that Flash could have gotten by without being on the phone. I don't think it was that much of a deal breaker that it wasn't on the phone. But when they came out with the iPad, and Flash wasn't on the iPad, that was, I think, a different, I think that was sort of the nail in the coffin for Flash at that point, to say, okay, like you're really not going to be part of the iOS environment. And the writing was kind of on the wall at that point. But, you know, Flash had a great run, right? I mean, it was on whatever it was, 98% of computers. Oh, yeah. And it was just this ubiquitous runtime that was fantastic. It enabled multi-billion and now trillion-dollar businesses with things like YouTube. Mm-hmm. So it was an amazing piece of technology that they built and got into the hands of, you know, billions of people. And, you know, I think they would look at it as a success, even though in the long run that's now sort of on its way out.
Yeah, well, I remember it, and I love Flash. So I'm just gonna give it a salute, actually, for the adventures that we had in the earlier days of the, well, I guess first 15 years of the internet. You know,
there were a lot of people that made a lot of money, and a lot of businesses were built on top of that, right? Consulting companies and web development companies that did extremely well. And I think it allowed a sense of design on the web that maybe HTML didn't allow, right? The sort of freedom to build things with different components and different look and feel that HTML ended up kind of supporting eventually. But some of the Flash stuff that came out was, you know, extremely creative. There's one, actually, if you want the real Canada one, there's like a customized Santa video app that was built on Flash. So you could upload like your kids' names, and Santa walks through, you know, a story and says your kids' names. Like stuff like that is like just super creative and very engaging. You can upload your own pictures into it, and so you end up with this video with your kids' pictures and Santa saying their name. And I do that for my kids. I know like they've loved those videos. So just some stuff that people built with it, I think, was like really, really creative, that, you know, really wasn't possible with HTML at the time. And, you know, obviously HTML since evolved to something I think that is definitely more competitive, but for a long time, it was the only way you could do things outside the box.
Oh, I remember doing a couple of party invites with it, and just posting that on the web. And it was because it allowed you to be creative and with relatively simple tool set, which, you know, yeah, I always appreciated. And it's interesting what you said about how Apple, you know, really frames the conversation, because I think they do that really, really well. I was in Lisbon last week, and had really front seats when Craig, I'm going to butcher this name, Craig Federighi, you know, did his presentation about the European concern around, you know, opening up multiple app stores outside of their control. I think they call it side loading or whatever, but they made it sound so compelling. Like, of course, this is what we want. Apple knows everything, you know. But at the end of the day, well, they're, you know, they are good at making you stand in line. But when you start thinking about it a little bit again, I'm pretty sure I'm responsible enough that I cannot get, you know, the Russian hackers going all over me just because I want to download some app from another store.
Right.
But, you know, I guess that's why they're the $2 trillion company now. Well,
agreed.
And as you're on your way to become a $3 trillion company, that's what I'm hoping for and betting on. So, we'll tell you what, the theme of Afternoon Tea is to, you know, to speak to wonderful Canadian entrepreneurs like yourself, and to learn from the journey. So I have these two questions I ask, you know, in every one of the episodes. So I would like to know if you can just please provide one piece of advice that would help younger Canadian founders.
I think the one piece, I've got a couple of theories. I think software in Ottawa, so I'll look at Ottawa specifically just for a second, is meant for really boring software companies. So there was a company in Ottawa called Cognos that did business intelligence software that did extremely well and sold to IBM. There's a company out in Canada right now called Kinaxis that's doing supply chain management software. There's Rewind that's doing backup software. There was Clipfolio, or there is Clipfolio that does dashboards for your data. There's another company called Ascent Compliance that's handling compliance issues. Like, it is the headquarters of boring software. That's my theory on Ottawa. So to me, it's, the amount of capital that you have access to in Canada, and really Ottawa in particular, is relatively limited. You are not likely to start the next AI, VR, 3D modeling company, whatever you want, that the new technology is in the city, because the access to capital just isn't here like it is in the States. And so you have to start with stuff that a lot of people don't like to build. My dad once said, if you want to be really rich, be a garbage man, because no one wants to take out the garbage, right? So do the stuff that all these other entrepreneurs and founders don't want to do. And that was really one of the reasons why we worked on backups, because we thought that there would be very little competition, because I don't think anyone grows up and says, like, I want to work on backup software. It's not the most exciting piece of software that exists. So I guess my advice to young Canadian founders is kind of, at least if you're in Ottawa, really focus on really boring software. And I guess the other one is just, you have to, I do believe that the Canadian founders are more geared towards starting not necessarily big venture-backed companies, like more lifestyle companies that provide this great outcome, which is fantastic. But if you are seeing your business or your side hustle take off, taking capital and really trying to grow that business, I think is a worthwhile endeavor, and you should really try and take advantage of it. Opportunities like what we're doing with Rewind don't come around very often. And so one of the things that we thought about when we were deciding to raise money was, you don't want to be on your deathbed wondering, what if we had taken money? Well, how big could we have gotten that company? So if you're seeing traction, I'd say don't hesitate to raise money. There's lots of capital that's out there these days, and just go for it.
Just go for it. So be boring and just go for it. That's that is honestly great advice, and unique advice. I gotta say, I really appreciate that. Well, last and equally important question then is, can you share the name of a Canadian entrepreneurial star founder that you look up to, and why?
Sure. I think so. Toby Lutke, I think, sort of, and Harley, both sort of rise to the top here for me. I think it's amazing what they've built, and that they've been able to scale their own skill sets from starting the company to whatever it is now, thousands of people. I think it's just an incredible journey. The job of a CEO as your company is scaling really changes almost every 6 months. Like, the job I'm doing now is incredibly different than the job I was doing 6 months ago, which is incredibly different than the job I was doing the previous 6 months. So to do that over and over and over again, to the point where it's, whatever the size that they are today, Canada's largest company, I think is amazing. So I just take one of those two. Then I think the other one that I would add in, I'm going to give you three. So you asked for one, I'm giving you three. I'm a big fan of Mike Murchison at Ada Support. I think Mike I think Mike's brilliant. I love what he's building there. He's also part of a group in Toronto called Union Capital that is invested in Rewind and a couple of other companies, and just a huge fan of what Mike's building at Ada and how he's running that company. So those would be the three, I think, that I'm looking up to these days.
Well, fantastic. The thing about Toby that I think is really interesting is I remember being on a Clubhouse chat, and it was him and I think it's Daniel Eckberg, the Spotify CEO, and Zuckerberg were the three people being interviewed, and it just seems so like, oh, that's just a typical day for me, as the founder of Shopify. And it's like, you know what, you're doing Canada proud. Like, you're sticking up there, and you do belong among those giants of our of our peers. So either way, thank you for sharing those, and Mike, thank you for sharing the tales today, and congratulations with Rewind and the continued success as you go from round C and D, and just keep doing great stuff. I don't want to say boring stuff, because I don't agree. I don't think it's boring, but I do understand boring is what businesses want. So there's good opportunity in that, but just keep doing the great stuff. And, and hopefully some of the kids on the hockey team, either if they don't go to the NHL, you can influence them to go into the tech industry and create that next big business too.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris. It was great being here.
Fantastic.